Hello, everyone, and welcome to your latest Roman PowerPoint, hosted by me, your lovely guest host. And today we're going to be talking about the rise of the Roman Empire. So, Rome originated in the Italian peninsula. As many of you might know from earlier in the year, it is shaped like a boot, with the toe of that boot being Sicily, down at the very bottom there, as you can see. And if you look to the north, you can sort of see some mountainy regions on the border. Those are the Alps. They're very famous and very impenetrable mountains. Those will be a little trick up one of Rome's enemies' sleeves later on. Not going to say who right now. And also, the terrain is much more smooth in Italy than Greece, which will allow for Rome to have many more people and thusly be much more prosperous. So the Latins built Rome on the plain of Latinium, located in central Italy by the Tiber River. As you can see right there, you have the Tiber River, and then you have Rome, right by the western Mediterranean Sea. And then we have two main stories that tell the story of how Rome was founded. Our first one is the tale of Remus and Romulus. As babies, their father said, why would I want these? Chucked them by the river. And they were rescued by a wolfess who fed them and kept them healthy. And one day, Remus said, I think I want to found a nice little quaint city here, and I'm going to name it Rheims. But then Romulus said, no, killed his brother, and decided to name the city after himself, Rome. Now, our second major myth is Aeneas and the Trojan followers. So basically, a famous Greek poet named Virgil wrote an epic, the Aeneid. Aeneas was the main character in this epic, and he was a Trojan hero, and along with his sailors, they sailed across the Mediterranean Sea after the Greeks captured Troy, so they just said, nope, we're out, we're not having this. So they just left Troy, and he had many adventures, ending with his marriage to the king's daughter. Later, he united the Trojans, the Latins, who were the local people at the time, and he eventually became the father of Rome. Now, the Romans were heavily influenced by their forefathers, and in many respects their cultural fathers, the Greeks and the Etruscans. The Etruscans more so than the Greeks. The Etruscans were skilled metal workers, and the Etruscans provided the model for the Roman army, which, as some of you may know, was a very, very good army. Now, Rome's beginnings. For many years in Rome's early years, the Etruscan nobility ruled over Rome, but eventually the Roman people got tired of them and said, we don't think we really like you anymore. How about you get the heck out? And so they overthrew them and established a republic. Now, if you remember from the ideology unit from the beginning of the year, a republic is basically any country that is not ruled by a king or queen. Now, Rome just so happened to be a somewhat democratic republic, so citizens could vote to elect officials into office, and they could vote on laws. Now, Rome had one of the finest armies in the world at the time. It was very powerful. It had insanely well-trained soldiers. Not only that, but they were made to be good problem solvers. Each legion, which is the sort of unit of the Roman army, had about 6,000 soldiers at the time. Now, nowadays, you might think that that's not very much. But for the time, 6,000 was quite a lot, because keep in mind, around this time in world history, there were only a couple million people in the entire world. So, this is just an example, but imagine if America had, per se, 500 million people in the army. That would just be quite a lot. Now, as some of you might also know, Rome had a top-notch road network. This was not only to help, the people of Rome get from city to city, but mainly so that their army could move around quickly and efficiently. Because before this point, you just have to march your army through the swamps and the hills and the forests, which, as you can imagine, wasn't great, because your gear would get all wet, or you would lose it, or people would get tuberculosis or pneumonia, and they would die. Which was obviously not very good if you're trying to lead an army. So the Romans one day said, we have a good idea. What if we don't march our men through, the literal swamp, and instead we build nice roads everywhere so we can walk around? And, well, that's what they did, and that just happened to have the unintended consequence of letting the people move around much, much easier. Now, Rome actually began as a confederation, and they would give, full citizenship to certain people. And by certain people, they meant civilized people. Now, the thing you have to understand about the Romans is that they were very egocentric. They thought of themselves as the true bastion of civilization in the world, and that they were just, the very peak of humanity. Everybody else was just, backwards barbarians. So pretty much, if you assimilated to Rome and adapted to Roman culture, you would be a-okay in their book, and you'd get to come on in, and you'd be all friends. But if you didn't adapt Roman culture and, try to actually stay with your people, they'd say, we don't like you anymore, and they'd slap you around every 50 years, and then force you into the army. So as you can imagine, some of them weren't too happy about this, particularly those in the Balkans. Now, those who decided to work with Rome and cooperate, the Romans said, you might have a chance at civilization, my friend. And so the Romans would call them allies, and so then the leaders of these former tribes, now part of the Roman Confederation, they would then be given the status of Roman allies. And what this meant is that the former leader of those tribes, whether it be the king or just the chieftain or whatever, they would be allowed to still remain power in whatever region they were in. Which almost nothing would change for them except, maybe paying a couple taxes to Rome every year. But other than that, life really didn't change for them because they decided to cooperate. So the ruling caste in many of these places stayed the same. Now, Rome's government was a republic, and there were two classes of people in Rome. The patricians, the wealthy land-owning aristocracy who pretty much ruled Rome, and then you had the plebs, the peasants, the unwashed masses, if you will. This was everybody else, from your lowliest shoe shine all the way up to your highest merchant. Pretty much everybody who wasn't a land-owning, wealthy man, they became a pleb. They were a peasant, in the eyes of the Roman nobility, that is. Now, the Roman government was organized around a constitution. However, unlike our constitution here in America, this was a verbal constitution. So imagine if every single senator in the U.S. Congress had to memorize the entire U.S. Constitution word for word. It might be a little bit of a headache, and that's probably what it was for the Romans, too. Now, power was separated by three branches. Sound familiar? Now, the three branches of the Roman government were the assembly, the senate, and the magistrate. This made up the tripartite government. The assembly was adult male Romans who passed laws and elected magistrates. Any adult male Roman could vote in a somewhat form of direct democracy. The second was the Senate, which was made up of the wealthy, aristocratic fat cats, and they would actually, help pass laws, and they would pretty much control Rome's finances and its foreign policy. And they were by far the most powerful form of government. Now, only wealthy, landowning, and well-connected people could become senators. And getting a job in the Senate was very prestigious, and you go, oh, did you hear? Marcus, he got a job in the Senate. Oh, I'm so jealous of him. He's so lucky. And then you become the talk of the town. Everybody would love you. It's a very cushy job, to say the least. Now, the magistrates were elected officials who enforced laws and judged legal cases. They started off in lower offices like quaestor, who pretty much was like a accountant who would keep track of the money, and the aedile, who would maintain public buildings and festivals. Sort of like, it's kind of hard to equate to anything in modern times. Maybe sort of like maybe like a more prestigious form of janitor might be the best comparison I can make. Now, another important part was the tribune of plebs, which, as you might be able to guess by stuff of the name, was the only form of government which, the 70% of the population, the peasants, could actually participate in. And the Council of Plebs, they could veto laws or act of any magistrate. So it was a pretty decent little deal the plebs had, but obviously the other branches made sure that the plebs stayed in check, so to speak. And then you had the upper offices, who were composed of the praetor, who judged cases, managed the city, and led armies, and then the consul, the top two officials in the government that shared power and could veto the other. Now, do you think having two people who can veto each other's ideas is a good idea? Probably not. But what do you think about this? Now, the Roman Republic had a dictator who served for the people and was a temporary ruler during emergencies. So pretty much what this meant is per se a country was under attack. You go to them and say, "Hey, can you take away our democratic freedoms and absolutely rule us for 10 years?" And they go, "Oh, okay, sure." Now, of course, the problem with this is some of them would go, is that some of them, when asked to hand over their power, would go, this is little. So what would happen is that when some of them would be asked to hand over their power, this is what would happen. Hey, look, Aurelius, we really love you, man. Top-notch dictator. But can you please get out? Oh, no, I think I like this here. I want to stay. So you had the problem that some people didn't want to leave their position. Now, one of the most famous, maybe not so much today, but one of the most famous Roman emperors was named Cincinnatus. And he is known as the noble dictator. This is because, well, he was actually just, somewhat of an average guy, and pretty much he was just a farmer whose son was killed in battle, and this left him pretty much destitute, because before this, he was a pretty influential member of the Senate, and he was very well respected. But after his son got killed in war, he got sent off to the farm, quite literally. And, well, one day Rome was under attack, and they said, "Cincinnatus, pal, can I call you pal? Anyways, we really need your help. We're not doing so hot, and we're kind of wondering if you would like to become dictator for a little while." And so Cincinnatus said, "All right, sure. I got nothing better to do. I'm just sitting here tending my cows, farming wheat. I could really use something interesting in life." And so he went out, he won the war, and most surprisingly to some of the Roman people, he actually laid down his power after his term was over. Just remember what I said just a second ago, didn't always happen. So it was somewhat of a good thing when the leader just went, "No, I will stay in power," instead of, what Cincinnatus did, which is going, I really like this job, and I appreciate your offers of making me king, giving me fabulous wealth, and a really cushy estate with a top-notch pool and a great view of the Caribbean. But Bahamas real estate isn't really my domain. I think I'm gonna go back to my farm. I quite enjoy the cows. I've changed my mind. I enjoy the simple life. Now, Rome's government was based around the 12 tables. Tables 1 and 2 were civil procedure, like, food prices and how roads would be put and so on. Third table was debt, which is, you owe somebody money, the government would come over, they break your kneecaps. The fourth table was, how to raise a kid, or how to raise a parent if you were a kid. The fifth table was inheritance, per se. Your dad had a lot of money. You wanted all that money, but your brother also wanted all that money. They wanted to make sure you just wouldn't, shank your brother a couple times and steal all that money for yourself. Now, tables 6 and 7 were property. Who owned what and why they owned that. Now, of course, this table was somewhat, and by somewhat I mean heavily, made in favor of the aristocracy, who obviously quite liked their cushy land with their cushy views, and all their slaves who would do everything for them. So obviously they weren't too keen on giving up that nice lifestyle. So this was sort of made sure that the property stayed in their hands and out of the hands of the plebs. But that's how that was set up. And then the torts were pretty much like, don't stab people, don't murder people, don't go around slapping your neighbors. It's a very rude thing to do. Don't harass people. And then Table 9 was set up for capital punishment. So let's say you had gone around slapping people, the government would say, no slapping people. And, well, they'd slap you so hard you would die. Um, and then Table 10 was all about funerals, Table 11 marriages, and then Table 12 crimes. Lastly, all the boring stuff. Who cares about marriage? Now, how did Rome go from a small republic into a huge giant empire? Well, from what we've learned earlier, how do empires gain territories? Is it by colonization? Conquering? How do you think Rome did it? More, of course. But who did the Romans fight, and why did they fight them? If you think you have the answer for any of these questions, please go ahead and pause the video here and discuss it. Alright, have you discussed it? I'm trusting you here. You better do it, Mr. Sprague. Alright, good. Hopefully you've done it, or else I'm going to be quite upset. Anyways, this has been your most enjoyable and courteous host, Landis Scott, signing off.